This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
COVID-19 cases worldwide exceed 2.5 million with over 171,000 deaths. Africa reports over 23,500 cases as recoveries surpass 6,000. And the UN says coronavirus crisis could double the number of people suffering acute hunger. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Muta live in Nairobi. Ramanyang joins me now with your business headlines.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Global oil prices fall to historic lows as the pandemic continues to roil markets. And Algeria's central bank has offered to reschedule bank loans to cushion companies from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
Thanks, Rama. Well, we begin with the latest COVID-19 figures from around the world. The number of confirmed cases at this point is nearing 2.5 million worldwide. Over 171,000 people have died. The US has seen a surge of over 28,000 new cases in a single day. Total cases there top 780,000. That's nearly a third of the global total. About half of all cases are in Europe, with Spain and Italy the hardest hit. Spain is the second country to surpass 200,000 total cases. Turkey is now a hotspot. It has a total number of infections that have surpassed 90,000. The Chinese mainland has not recorded any deaths for the past 6 days. It confirmed 11 new infections on Monday, 4 of them from people arriving from overseas. Well, now, Africa has so far recorded more than 23,500 cases of COVID-19. The number of recoveries has risen to about 6,000. Meanwhile, about 1,100 people have died from the disease on the continent. Egypt and South Africa maintain the highest number of infections in Africa. They're followed closely by Algeria and Cameroon, as well as Ghana, which has become the first African country to lift the coronavirus lockdown in cities of Accra and Kumasi. Here in East Africa, Kenya has reported 15 new cases, bringing the total to 296. Authorities there have been tussling over reopening the country's courts. Judges are against the move as it risks exposing them to the coronavirus. Moving to North Africa, Tunisia has extended its lockdown to the 3rd of May, after which it will ease restrictions gradually. The curfew will remain in force but will be shortened by 2 hours during the holy month of Ramadan. This means it will be observed from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. local time and not from dusk to dawn, as it has been. Here is Adnan Shawashi with that report.
The National Security Council has announced that the implementation of the targeted confinement measures will be gradual. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 task force will constantly review the situation.
We must study in an objective way what happened since the beginning of the crisis and its impact on people's lives. We will improve and adapt the measures to the development of the situation in Tunisia and the world.
Tunisia is imposing a stricter general lockdown. Authorities say it won't be lifted if the epidemiological indications do not improve nationally.
Military health doctors, epidemiologists and preventive medicine specialists have informed the president about the epidemiological situation in Tunisia and the multiple possible scenarios.
Hundreds of citizens have been fined for violating the confinement measures, while at least 530 people have already been arrested.
People must think of public interest and help the state by accepting all the lockdown measures. Otherwise, there will be more infected patients and victims in the country.
According to the Coronavirus Crisis Unit, fines range from $300 to $1,700 for those who violate the mandatory isolation. Tunisian health authorities have announced at least 100 248 cases of recovery from COVID-19. The National Observatory of New and Emerging Diseases explains that the decline in the number of new confirmed cases of infection recorded in recent days is the result of people respecting the prevention and the general lockdown measures imposed by the state. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Egypt has taken extreme measures this week to avoid public gatherings during Sham el-Nassim festivities. The government has ordered the closure of parks and zoos, among other anti-epidemic measures. The country has so far recorded over 3,000 cases of COVID-19 and 250 deaths. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has the details.
Videos of the vacant waterfront promenade in Egypt's Mediterranean city Alexandria surprised the country. This was the result of reduced movements of people due to measures aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19. The government has clamped down on vehicle and pedestrian traffic during the Easter holidays. It's an unprecedented measure.
For the first time in its history, since it was founded in 1891, the Giza Zoo has shut down during Sham el-Nassim. This is a very important preventive measure. It's a state policy to avoid crowding at all public places in the country.
The Giza Zoo is the prime destination for the public during Sham el-Nassim holiday. No one could have imagined that this would be the scene in the biggest park at the heart of a city of about 18 million residents. Elsewhere, all other parks have also been closed down, losing revenue from one of the busiest and most profitable days of the year.
Park ticket sales are the main revenue, so we're suffering tremendously from the lockdown. We've taken a decision, though, that the general welfare and the health security of citizens is a priority. Financial losses can be recouped in future.
Egypt has so far been trying to be a step ahead of the pandemic. During the Easter holidays, police banned people from gathering along public streets in most Egyptian cities, and more preventive steps could be announced soon. This week, the Egyptian Prime Minister is scheduled to announce new measures during the holy month of Ramadan. The ongoing night curfew, which starts at 8 o'clock in the evening, would allow people to gather during their break of the fasting meal, a tradition the government would want to avoid under COVID-19. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Ethiopia is continuing its redistribution of supplies across Africa to help countries in the fight against COVID-19. The supplies will be airlifted from the Addis Ababa Bole International Airport. The supplies include personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, and test kits.
The Bole International Airport Africa Humanitarian Air Hub is now fully operational, and the World Health Organization and the World Food Programme coordination effort is making supply delivery to African countries for their fight against COVID-19 possible.
With this partnership, life-saving events are getting to our countries, to all our countries in the African region. This is something that must be commended and must be praised, because we are being able to send supplies and life-saving supplies in the middle of this pandemic to our countries in Africa.
Ethiopian Airlines, in charge of the actual delivery, has already made first round of supplying these medical consignments to respective African countries, and says swift deliveries will continue in the coming few days.
So it will continue geographically closer countries like Djibouti, Nairobi, Sudan, Uganda, Tanzania. So it will continue like that, spreading to West, South, and East Africa. We'll have 50 countries to cover. The schedule is with 737, 800.
At the moment, more supplies for coronavirus prevention and treatment are making their way from the rest of the world to Africa. The soon-to-come supplies include one from WHO and the other from Jack Ma Foundation. And this humanitarian air hub will receive all and deliver it to respective nations in the coming few days.
So instead of having two flights, the same cargo will have two shipments. One coming with supplies coming from WHO, the second part coming from the Jack Ma Foundation, and we will arrive in countries, and countries will be informed of what they have coming there. So the WHO representative in each country with the Ministry of Health will be there to actually get these supplies when they arrive in a coordinated manner.
On the other hand, and despite a relatively enough COVID-19 related supplies at hand, African states remain to be on high alert. Both WHO and Africa CDC agreed the worst of the coronavirus pandemic is yet to come, and states must alert their citizens to practice utmost precautions and personal protection now more than ever. Group Tara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, health experts from China and Angola have held a video conference to share their experiences on the prevention and control of the coronavirus. The meeting was between the Angolan government, the Chinese embassy in Angola, and the Sichuan Provincial Health Commission. Information shared was in regard to the clinical diagnosis and treatment of COVID-19, prevention and control, as well as the protection of medical staff. Angola has commended the anti-epidemic cooperation it has with China. The country says that shared knowledge will further enhance its ability to respond to the epidemic. So far, Angola has reported 24 cases of the deadly virus and 2 deaths. Well, today marks the World Creativity and Innovation Day. Tunisian engineers and startups are marking the day by presenting their latest inventions. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi brings us more on this story.
Tunisian doctors and professors at the Faculty of Medicine, as well as the research team at the prestigious engineering school of Sfax, have joined efforts to invent machines and medical equipment to be used by medical workers in the fight against COVID-19.
Tunisian universities and research units, in partnership with the technological pole as well as the economic and industrial partners, have shown that creativity and innovation are at the heart of the fight against coronavirus. The state supports all initiatives and inventions.
Health authorities have expressed fear of a shortage of ventilators at hospitals across the country. A group of Tunisian engineers are trying to fill the gap by making ventilators available and affordable.
For patients with the worst effects of the infection, the body's oxygen levels drop and make it hard to breathe without assistance. The ventilator we have invented can push air with increased levels of oxygen into the lungs and save lives.
Members of the Tunisian Association of Research and Innovation and the Aviation Club of the South in the city of Sfax have made a drone which is equipped with thermal cameras and loudspeakers to enforce the general lockdown.
The drone can be used by security forces and health authorities from any location in a 2-kilometer perimeter to contain the spread of the virus. It can check the temperatures of people in the street and warn anyone who is not respecting the prevention measures.
Students, teachers and research units at the Tunisian universities have made 250 applications as well as inventions available to the COVID-19 task force. A scientific committee will fund the development of these innovative solutions. Innovators and research teams across Tunisia are working on ways to contain the spread of the pandemic. Authorities here assert that the fight against the virus is the responsibility of the medical teams and all stakeholders, including engineers and startups. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, staying with matters innovation, in Burkina Faso, a young iron worker has invented a pedal-powered machine to ease the washing of hands in the country. Since the first cases of COVID-19 in the country, local initiatives have been popping up in order to help curb the virus. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
This is the pedal-powered hand-washing machine. You simply pump the water with your foot and wash your hands. More of these devices are placed in front of supermarkets, banks and restaurants in Burkina Faso. The invention is seen by many as an easy way to break the chain of virus transmission.
I think that using this machine is very convenient because the risk of contamination is very low. With this hand washer, you don't touch the wrists of the tap. So I think it's well done. And I think that if everyone adopts this machine, it will be safer.
This pedal hand washing system is very reassuring. It saves us from touching the faucet, which is used by many people who are probably carriers of the coronavirus. I've seen people complaining about the risk of contamination of the old pedal-less hand washing machines. But with this, pedal hand washing machine is cleaner and safer.
Petropia George is the man behind this invention. He is a specialist in metal joinery and has a workshop in the capital Ouagadougou.
When the coronavirus arrived in our country, we found that others were making hand-washing machines and users were also touching the tap with their hands to run the water. And with these traditional hand-washing machines, the risk of contamination of the virus was real. So, it was from this observation that we tried to make the pedal hand-washing machine to prevent the virus from spreading, and it worked. There is no risk of contamination with our model. Today, everyone appreciates our work, and the orders keep increasing.
George and his team of 15 apprentices make the machine by cutting iron bars and then welding and assembling them. It takes 3 hours to make a hand-washing machine. Every day, they produce more than 10 machines, with a capacity to hold 100 liters of water.
We came to see because our company wants to know how this pedal washing machine is made and whether it can meet our requirements. Frankly, I think it's a very good innovation because they are pedals that allow users not to touch the faucet, which will prevent contamination, and that's a good thing.
The pedal hand washing machine costs between $70 and $200. With nearly 500 infections, Burkina Faso is among the countries in sub-Saharan Africa most affected by COVID-19. The small action of washing hands can make a huge difference in the spreading and containment of the virus. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Now, more than 400 people have died from COVID-19 in Spain over the past 24 hours, bringing the death toll there to 21,000. The country also saw nearly 4,000 new infections. That's up 2%, but it also indicates the rate of infections is falling in Europe's worst-hit country. Spain is now considering allowing children under the age of 12 to go out under the close supervision of their parents. The country imposed one of Europe's strictest lockdowns 6 weeks ago. Now, the World Health Organization says all available evidence suggests the coronavirus came from an animal, adding there's nothing to indicate the virus was manipulated or produced in a laboratory. But the UN agency says it's still unclear how the virus jumped to humans. Last week, US President Donald Trump said his government was trying to determine whether the virus may have come from a lab in Wuhan. The Wuhan Institute of Virology has strongly denied that, dismissing speculation that it synthesized the virus or allowed it to escape. Well, 2 weeks since Wuhan ended its lengthy lockdown, life is still slowly getting back to normal. CGTN reporter Zhu Jiangxin is there and shows us how taxis, restaurants, and other city staples are taking in the new normal.
Occupied yellow taxis are once again part of Wuhan's busy rush hour. It's not hard to hail one near our hotel, and we're heading to Wuhan's oldest Yangtze River Bridge, the most traffic control section of the city.
就是平时这个早高峰的时候，估计堵车的现象还是比较严重的。
堵车现在就是跟原来差不多啊，但是就说作为我们出租车行业的话，就是那个营业额就上不去。
Joe is on the road from 6 a.m. to about 4 p.m. and earned about $30 per day. That's less than half what he's used to making.
8号那天一开始就说
The traffic flow was the euro and taxis were allowed on April 8th, but people walking the street were still rare.
就说比原来少。
Joe says that residents have stayed vigilant enough to come out, as he has to wait outside the pickup area for a longer time. Thus, the wider resumption of work is key to his income, and that rate accordingly matches the resumption of Wuhan's traffic.
The traffic now is about 80% of the previous daytime peak. Due to the risk control policy and the closures of busy places at night, residents mostly stay home and traffic flow is much less in the evening.
But dinner is not a big deal for locals. It's been said that the breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and most people in Wuhan emphatically agree. Lining up at reopened food stores goes beyond breakfast. And Mr. Fun is happy to do so for his parents at a time on a pastry shop.
Wuhan people like to have their breakfast outside. We had to stay at home before, which was quite depressing. Now with the epidemic more under control, all breakfast bars are reopened and everyday life is back to normal. So when breakfast comes this way, we feel at ease and it adds more vitality to the city.
Zhou Jiaxing, CGTN, Wuhan.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. It's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up. The UN says coronavirus crisis could double the number of people suffering acute hunger. And heavy rains continue to pound East Africa as hundreds are displaced.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The United Nations World Food Programme has warned that the COVID-19 pandemic could double the number of people suffering from acute hunger. This may potentially push the figure to more than 250 million by the end of 2020. This was revealed during the launch of the Global Report on Food Crises, produced by the WFP and 15 partners. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moi has more on this story.
The United Nations World Food Programme says the people facing acute food insecurity stands to rise to 265 million in 2020 due to the impact of COVID-19. That's an increase of 130 million from the 135 million recorded in 2019. According to the World Food Programme, COVID-19 continues to negatively impact millions who are already hanging by a thread.
Already in 2020, we've had locust invasions, and now there is the COVID-19 pandemic, which we predict could almost double the people in acute hunger by the end of 2020 across the world. The only way we can halt this trend is if generous funding for humanitarian crises like the one here in South Sudan continues.
Lockdowns and the global economic recession have hit the livelihoods of millions across the globe. According to the latest global report on food crisis, most of those facing food shortages are in countries affected by conflict, climate change and economic crisis. South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Sudan and Nigeria are among the hardest hit countries.
Nowhere else in the world has the level of food insecurity as South Sudan. Last year, we had to feed 5 million people due to fighting and flooding.
The Global Report on Food Crisis, which is based on 2019 data, was released by a network of humanitarian and development partners, the Global Network Against Food Crisis, of which WFP is a member. Daniel Arap-Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The East African region has witnessed heavy rainfall and flooding over the past few months. Experts warn that the rains will continue. In Kenya, dozens of people have already died in the western part of the country. Mudslides occurred over the weekend after a heavy downpour. More than 20 people have been reported missing. Heavy rains have also been reported in Uganda. President Yoweri Museveni has urged people to move away from Lake Victoria's shores to avert a disaster. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, thousands have been displaced and dozens killed in flooding in the eastern part of the country. And a malaria outbreak in Zimbabwe has killed at least 131 people. This has piled pressure on the country's health system that is currently struggling to contain the coronavirus. Here is CGTN's Mahia Muta with the very latest on the situation there.
201 outbreaks have caused 135,585 cases and led to 131 deaths. A staggering 18,690 of those cases were reported in just 1 week. The malaria-prone areas of Manicaland, Masvingo, and Mashonaland East provinces have been the worst affected. It's feared, though, that the true extent of the outbreaks may not be fully recorded because some of the infected may be unable to visit health facilities where COVID-19 cases are priority. According to the Health Ministry, 90 outbreaks have been controlled. However, the threat of more cases remains high as the country is currently in the warm and wet season during which malaria infections peak. Zimbabwe had made steady progress in rolling back malaria, but has seen a resurgence of the disease in recent years, during which erratic climatic conditions have caused a series of cyclones that have created a breeding ground for transmitting mosquitoes. The upsurge in malaria cases will put a further strain on a health sector that is facing financial constraints in the fight against the coronavirus. Mahia Muta, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Elsewhere, 44 suspected Boko Haram jihadists have been found dead in a Chad prison where they were being held in the capital N'Djamena. Opposition and rights groups say that they could have been murdered, while more speculation revolves around the idea of collective suicide. Here is CGTN's Jin Keo with that report.
An autopsy carried out on 4 of the dead prisoners revealed traces of a lethal substance. Some died from heart attacks, while others suffered from suffocation. They'd been captured during an army operation around Lake Chad.
We did a head count. We found that only 44 of 58 prisoners were actually called back to God under circumstances we don't know about.
The accused were meant to have been tried by a criminal court. They were allegedly mistreated under confinement in a single cell, having no food or drinks for about 2 days. However, officials say that the suspects were fined the day before they died.
We have automatically decided to open a judicial inquiry to determine the cause of this mass death of inmates. So far, the medical examiner is still going with the examinations, but we already have autopsy pictures. Some of the lungs are burnt.
The government says 14 prisoners who survived would be questioned over the circumstances of the deaths. No such group suicide has occurred in the past.
As the bodies were rotting, we couldn't keep them, and the City Hall Health Department, along with the other authorities, decided to proceed with the burial of 40 bodies. And the medical examiner decided to take a sample of 4 bodies to do his autopsy.
Some say the prisoners could have swallowed poison to avoid divulging strategic information, while others speculate that they could have been following the example of the Islamic State group leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He blew himself up when a US raid cornered him into a dead-end tunnel in his Syrian hideout last October. Jin Keo, CGTN.
Well, as the restriction of movement to control the spread of COVID-19 in Kenya enters a 5th week, it has taken a huge toll on some public institutions. Now, the National Museums of Kenya is warning that its entire operations could be halted due to a lack of funding. And as CGTN's Robert Nagila reports, this situation could have a long-term impact on our health and environment.
Daniel Muturi, a snake expert, has worked at the Nairobi National Museum for the past 20 years, teaching visitors about the various types of snakes found in the country.
In a day, we can get about 250 Kenyans.
That was until mid-March, when the museum shut its doors for the first time in 110 years due to movement restrictions issued by the government to control the spread of COVID-19. Now, What was once a thriving tourist attraction in the heart of Nairobi resembles an abandoned complex. Historical debates on early man replaced by the chirping sounds of birds. And in place of guided tours, cats roam the grounds freely.
I feel sad. There is no one to visit the animals, so I close early.
The suspension of the National Museum's activities is already having an impact on its operations.
The challenge is serious.
The museum's Director General says shutting their doors to the public has decreased their revenue source to almost a trickle.
We collect about Kenya shillings 20 million, and say monthly for these visits to our national museums and the monuments.
That's the equivalent of $200,000 per month. Part of the cash is used to feed the animals under their care and to fund research for antivenom and vaccines.
We could, I would say, release these animals to the wild if the worst comes to the worst. But remember, for some of them, they have been experimental animals where the process of development of vaccine has been going on.
Under its wing, the National Museums of Kenya also looks after and maintains several UN World Heritage sites and archives archaeological finds related to some of the earliest remains of the human species. CGTN has learned talks are ongoing with the government for a bailout. But with most of the country's resources diverted towards fighting the pandemic, the museum is seeking help from donors and well-wishers to help fund vital research and animal conservation of endangered species. Robert Nagelo, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's now go to Rama for the latest in business. Rama.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business news. Global oil prices fall to historic lows yet again as the pandemic continues to roil markets. And Algeria's central bank is offering to reschedule bank loans to cushion companies from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome back to the program. Let's start in the world of commodities. American oil futures continued to trade in negative territory on Tuesday, at least as far as the May contract is concerned. This is the first ever sub-zero dive, and it comes as concerns grew that the United States will run out of storage for a glut of oil, caused, of course, in part by the coronavirus lockdown and how that has eviscerated demand. Brent crude also did fall sharply in response to the collapse of demand following reduced economic activity. West Texas Intermediate crude for delivery in May, that's a contract that has everyone talking about it, traded at -$7 a barrel a little early in the session. That was higher than the -30 that we saw at the close on Monday. Now, the decline in the US contract was exaggerated by the looming expiry of that contract for delivery of oil in May, when a lack of storage is said to be especially acute. Restrictions on movement to try and contain COVID-19 have reduced oil demand by an estimated 30%. In North Africa, the country's central bank has announced it will defer or reschedule loan payments for companies that have been financially hit by the coronavirus crisis. Now, the measures also include continuing to finance customers who benefit from deferred repayment or rescheduling of loans. The bank will also reduce the minimum liquidity ratios for banks and financial institutions in order to raise the amount of funds available for on-lending into the market. The Bank of Algeria procedures have also exempted banks and financial institutions from compulsory formation of a safety cushion deducted from their own funds.
At the local development bank in Algeria, we appreciate these latest decisions in the context of reducing the weight of the spread of the epidemic on the Algerian economy, and we will follow these measures to serve the national economic interest.
Now, speaking of companies that are being hit hard by this pandemic, let's focus on South African Airways. Its future is still pretty dicey after the business rescue practitioners who are running it right now sent a draft retrenchment proposal to the two main unions at the airline. This comes in the wake of a letter sent to those practitioners by the government saying that there would be no more bailout money provided to the carrier. Here's UTN's Angela Coppola with the latest.
The cabinet met to discuss the future of the airline but came away with no clear decision. More than 10,000 people's jobs are at stake.
The president was elected on a very narrow margin, and he was pushed into the current position principally on the power and the force of the trade unions. Now, there is no way he's going to cross them now and dump them, because he may not be the president in the next 5-6 months.
The two major unions are standing their ground.
We are calling on our members to ignore this discussion that's taking place around workers accepting some type of sellout agreement. We reject it outright.
In South Africa, unions have to be consulted fully in any retrenchment process. It's the law.
One of the things that the trade unions are very good at, they know the law and they know their rights. And that is where it is going to come unstuck, I feel. They are putting so much pressure, I don't see how government can escape this one.
The unions, on the other hand, are talking to government directly.
As we speak, we are engaging very progressively with the minister in DPE around a solution for SAA, and discussions are taking place around SAA's future.
It's been 3 months since the business rescue practitioners have been in place, and still no plan and still no direction in terms of where SAA is going. Added to that, you've got the confusion within cabinet about making those political calls. So we wait and see. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 at OR Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg.
Now, payment tech commentators around the world, particularly on the fintech side, are considering whether this COVID-19 pandemic could accelerate the trend towards more use of non-cash payment methods. One company in that space is World Remit. It's encouraging Tanzanians who are depending on remittances to go completely cashless and avoid cash altogether in the event of a lockdown. The World Bank estimates that Tanzanians received over $2 billion in remittances between 2013 and 2018. Let's take a look now at how the coronavirus pandemic is solidifying the use of non-cash payment channels.
In Tanzania specifically, what we've done is partnered with mobile network operators as well as banks in order to ensure that our customers can get electronic services. In case of a lockdown in Tanzania, our Tanzanian recipients will still continue to receive money safely, securely and conveniently from wherever they are through mobile money, bank transfer as well as airtime top-up.
I have needs, and I also have relatives who live outside the country who I depend on for support. Despite the coronavirus, I have continued to receive remittances from them. They send the money directly to my phone, and when I get it, thanks to digital payment systems, I'm able to pay for other services using my phone.
Authorities in the UK have ruled out plans to ease the lockdown measures in place now, despite a decline in the number of daily COVID-19 infections reported. That said, business owners have different thoughts as they continue to take a beating from the lockdown.
Wherever you look across the UK, the doors are shut, the signs are up. Bars, pubs and restaurants are closed. The industry is on its knees. Like many others, the owners of this hugely popular pizza restaurant in Bristol, in southwest England, realised they had to adapt or the business would die. Paul Kemp switched to delivery only within 2 days. It's saved this establishment so far, but his 3 other pubs have had to close.
I was surprised by the level of demand that is there. I'm very, very surprised. So it's enough for me to be able to keep some staff and not furlough them. That market was already growing and it was there. So for right now, if we didn't have it, we'd be completely closed here as well.
National fast food chains are starting to reopen a limited number of stores, offering limited menus and limited home delivery, in the realisation that demand at the moment is almost unlimited. But adaptation doesn't work for everyone. Pubs and bars are far more reliant on people coming through the doors, and the same is true for those that supply them. A survey of almost 300 small independent breweries has found that on average sales are down 82%.
A lot of businesses in the hospitality sector can apply for a grant from government because essentially that industry has been shut down as a result of the lockdown measures for COVID-19. Now, at the moment, breweries can't apply for that grant. So that money is entirely locked off from them. And what we're asking government to do is essentially include them in that.
The latest figures show restaurant sales were down almost 60% in March, and the lockdown only started on the 23rd. Edson Diaz Fuentes owns a critically acclaimed Mexican restaurant in London. Their menu and style of cooking meant there was no easy overnight switch to takeaways, and things won't get much better when the lockdown eases.
The risk of the cash flow element, it's terrifying for small operators like us, where we don't know if we open our doors and we staff for minimum and we actually won't hit that minimum for a long period of time. That will be dramatic, and that will be the end of a lot of businesses in not only the country, around the world.
With the UK lockdown set to last at least until early May and an uncertain period after that, those in the hospitality industry face many more months of hardship. John Beaver, CGTN.
Over in Germany, there are over 147,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19, over 4,800 people dead so far. Many shops, however, did reopen on Monday, when the country's auto sector plans to resume some production in the course of this week. Germany has seen a steady decline in the number of new cases being reported, although officials are warning that the situation is still pretty fragile. CGTN's Iris Bitter reports from Berlin.
Germany has taken its first cautious steps towards opening back up its economy as shops with a surface area of 800 square meters or less have been allowed to reopen across much of the country. Previously, only stores deemed essential had been allowed to open their doors. The move comes as local governments are encouraging and, in some cases, requiring people to wear masks. On Monday, Bavaria became the second state in Germany to require people to cover their noses and mouths while shopping or riding public transportation. It's not just stores who are ramping up economic activity here. Germany's car industry is resuming production as well after a 4-week standstill. Both Daimler and Volkswagen are set to resume production at some of their European plants this week. Volkswagen says it will institute new safety measures, such as requiring workers to have their temperatures taken before coming to work. What's still unclear, though, is at what point German car makers could resume to pre-coronavirus levels of production, and critically for them, what sort of demand might be there. Volkswagen said that in March, its sales were down 40%. The car industry here employs more than 800,000 people, and German car makers are among the biggest car makers in the world. However, the resumption of normal activity in China, one of the key markets for German car makers, could at least help them weather the storm a bit better as the global pandemic continues to spread. Iris Spitzer, CGTN, Berlin.
And finally, back in North Africa, Tunisia's domestic industries are stepping up their efforts to manufacture over 30 million protective masks. Here's CGTN's Adin Chouachi exploring how domestic textile factories are changing their production lines.
President Kais Saied has visited the main production unit at the industrial zone in the central region of Kairouan. The head of state encouraged the factory staff to meet the 4-week deadline to make millions of face masks that are crucial in curbing the spread of the virus.
I'm deeply thankful for your relentless effort. You're working 24 hours a day, all weekdays, without interruption to make the masks.
Over 100 workers and administrative staff have voluntarily self-isolated at this industrial unit for over 5 weeks in order to provide the protective equipment for doctors, nurses and all healthcare workers who are on the front line against the pandemic, as well as the National Army and security forces.
You're all very courageous because you are making the equipment that will be used as our topmost weapons in this war against the virus. All Tunisians should take your example and be patient in this fight.
The Ministry of Industry has declared that 640 companies have been authorized to make face masks and protective gear. Accordingly, 100 additional enterprises will be granted the special agreement to manufacture protective equipment.
I have visited 4 factories. The prevention measures are very strict to guarantee the safety of the personnel and the quality of manufactured equipment. The workers are either self-isolated or the enterprises are in charge of providing transport and all logistics.
Thousands of coronavirus tests have been rolled out to factory workers. These devoted employees will not leave the production lines before manufacturing 32 million face masks.
Tunisian President Kais Saied has emphasized the importance of the contribution of all stakeholders in facing the coronavirus pandemic. The head of state added that ending speculation related to the marketing of face masks and protective gear is a national priority at this crucial period. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. At the top of the hour, though, we'll be reviewing something that happened on the global oil markets yesterday. To say the 20th of April was one crazy day for US crude would be a massive understatement. So what happened? What should you expect in the future? And why does this matter if you're not a consumer of American oil? We'll have some answers for you at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Mahia.
Thanks, Rama. Well, still ahead here on Africa Live. We look at how a cartoon in Nigeria is helping explain the dangers of coronavirus to children.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's now head to Nigeria, where a filmmaker there has found the most effective way of passing on the coronavirus message to children. The artist is using animation, and from the feedback, children are now understanding the deadly effects of COVID-19.
With schools closed and most children now indoors, most parents are finding it hard to make their young ones understand the gravity of the coronavirus pandemic. Nigerian filmmaker Niyi Akimoloyan is one such parent who found it hard to explain to his 5-year-old son what COVID-19 is and why the boy could not go out and play with his friends. Being a celebrated film producer and director, he found a creative way to do it.
But I still didn't get it until I kind of like changed the narrative and said, the coronavirus actually looks like a big monster and it's out there in the street, and if you go, it will catch you. And he says, okay, but daddy and mommy, we can go together. I said, no, if it catches daddy and mommy, you won't see daddy and mommy again, no more. And I mentioned his favorite, snack and all that. And the idea kind of synced.
It's true that children find cartoons and animations more interesting for them to relate with. Hence, Ni's choice to package the message on coronavirus in such animation is proving to be effective.
Habib, where do you think you're going?
Stay out my way. I'm going to play football with my friends, and there's nothing...
With a 10-member crew from his Anti-Hill studios, Ni has compiled a 90-minute animation on the viral outbreak. His creative illustrators work from home while he does the post-production. The storyline centers around 2 siblings, Habib and Funke. When Habib gets tired of staying in the house, he attempts to sneak out and play soccer. His older sister Funke warns him against it. But he defies her and is later confronted by the scary monster, which jolts him to reality. It works for the children who have watched it.
What's
My favorite part was when the boy opened the door and saw the coronavirus, the big monster outside, and he slammed the door and had to go inside. And now I know that this is not the right time to go anywhere or outside.
I think animation is important. In fact, I think it is probably the most valuable tool to use, during this pandemic. One, it's probably the only thing we can create remotely without having to actually see each other. If you wanted to do an advert now or a PSA with real people, it's not going to be possible with cameras and all that. So that shows you how powerful animation can work.
The animation has been translated to various African languages, including English, Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, French, and Swahili. It is currently broadcast on some terrestrial channels.
They keep telling me the kids keep watching over and over and over again. And I know that's happening because, the characters are fun, to watch. The animation is lively, it's funny. But what it does is that the message is going to stick. Almost every parent that has reached out has been complaining that both their soap and data, is running out. So that is quite an achievement, if you ask me.
Nigeria has so far recorded over 600 cases with 21 deaths. As of Sunday, Nigeria had recorded 627 cases of the virus and 21 people had died, including the president's chief of staff. As African governments race to tackle COVID-19, children are not left behind. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. Ugandan football fans feel the heat as lockdown extended for 21 days.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Let's kick off the sport in Uganda, where the local football federation has suspended the league for over a month, leaving thousands of fans at a loss. CGTN's Leon Senyange brings us more from Kampala on how die-hard supporters are coping with the lack of their favorite fix.
This was a typical afternoon for Kasim Chaze before every match day, a brush of paint in his favorite club's colors. He is a Kampala Capital City Authority Football Club supporter, and football has always been part of his life.
I was once a footballer. Now everything I do is from the heart and my love for football.
But it's been weeks since he last attended a match. The coronavirus pandemic has put a stop to all sports activities here, and fans like Chaze are feeling the pain.
My life is all about football, but I cannot play it now, and I cannot support my teams, then I have no life.
And Chaze isn't alone. The chants and goal celebrations at the stadium can be heard for miles around, but not anymore. With football matches now postponed due to the COVID-19 outbreak, it could take a long time before fans return here. It's still uncertain when games will even resume. The Uganda Football Federation has also suspended national team activities indefinitely.
We have missed a lot. There were even national team matches I was personally looking forward to.
Chaze's team KCC-AFC is only 4 points behind in the National Football League title race with 5 matches to play. He is afraid the lockdown could affect his team's performance.
The team had gained some momentum and our injured players had recovered, but they now have to rest again. It's really going the spirit we had.
For now, Chaze can only reminisce on the good times, hoping he's soon back cheering his team on in the stadium. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Japan says that it has not agreed to shoulder additional costs for the postponement of the 2020